Session 48 of the Law of One. Let's get into the evolution of fourth and fifth density. Let's begin. In this first part, we're going to cover half of the session, of course, because as you will see, there's going to be a very long discussion in, I believe it's question 6 of this session, and then there's another long discussion in question 7. So I didn't want to put the two of them together, and I think it was a good way to segment the session in part 1 and part 2. So like I said, first, this session has a little bit material from book 5, which we're going to discuss at the beginning. Then there is material that wasn't in the original books, and we're going to cover that shortly after that. And you're going to see why. And then there is some questions about Ra, which are kind of funny. And then we're going to get into the meat and bones of this session, or this first part, which is the work that is done in fourth and fifth density. Now we're going to cover sexual energy transfer again. We're going to get a little bit of insight there, and then a couple of loose questions, and the important one is the work that is done in fourth and fifth density. Why? Because you see, I try to bring, maybe, it's just my way of doing things, but I try to get the information that I know is, it generally seems like it's part of another dimension, another density, another incarnation, and so on, and that it doesn't seem useful, at first glance, but when you realize that you are not a limited being here, then you know that that information is helpful here as well. Now, the best way to make this connection, and you'll see when we get there, is to relate the energy centers or chakras and what they mean here for us with the information that is given to us in terms of fourth density and fifth density. So this is the way I'm going to cover this. So there seems to be a practical way of seeing, and I may be repeating, something that you already know, but it's always helpful when we support it with the material. So before getting too complicated on this, we're gonna get into that, don't worry, but I just wanted to make that mention because often when we, and I see this a lot in the communities, or at least the student communities, that people get off track with what things mean in history, or anything that has to do with evolution, about the practical information. Again, I'm always concerned with the practical information that we can use on a daily basis to, I don't want to use the word improve because that goes against my Zen teachings, but to reveal, rather, to unlearn things. So again, we're going to start with the first question that I have, and I think it's the sexual energy transfer. The first question, it's obviated because it's just asking about Carla's condition, physical energy, and vital energy, and she is, as previously stated, it's not much to take out there, but I'll probably just read it. They said that her vital energies are improving with time. The physical energies are less than previous asking. So just to mention quickly, vital energy is a sort of metaphysical energy that can't be measured. Let's just put it that way. And physical energy is what we have here, what we know. It's like when you feel tired, that's physical energy. Vital energy is something that, when we use the word revitalize, you're revitalizing. Are you drinking something specific? That's giving you physical energy. But that vital energy, it's a combination of subtle bodies and other stuff that we don't need to get into. So that's what the interplay was like. Her vital energy was improving, but her physical energies were less because she was, more worn out, say, for whatever reason. But her vital energies were improving, and that's something that apparently just goes over time. So, again, I don't want to get into that discussion here. But we're going to go now into the first question that I have, which is question 2. And this is going to bring us to sexual energy transfer again. And Don is asking basically for Carla. And that's why he says, I have a question from the instrument that I will read. You have suggested several times that sexual energy transfers aid the instrument's vital energy and this contact. It seems that this is not true for all people, that the sexual circuitry and the spiritual circuitry are not the same. Is this instrument an anomaly, or is the positive effect of sexual activity on spiritual energy normal for all third density beings? So this is Carla again, as you see in the first quote. Carla asking, it's funny how she calls herself instrument, which is appropriate in the questioning. And it has to do just with the energy transfer between spiritual and sexual circuitry. What's the difference? We're going to cover that. So, let's get into Ra's answer before I get... she says, sexual energy transfer aid the instrument's vital energy. This seems to be not true for all people. Okay, we're gonna cover this entirely. I just wanted to make sure that the question was properly introduced. So Ross says, this instrument, though not anomalous, is somewhat less distorted towards the separation of mind, body, and spirit than many of your third density entities. The energies of sexual transfer would, if run through the undeveloped spiritual, electrical, or magnetic complex, which you call circuitry, effectually blow out that particular circuit. Contrarily, the full spiritual energies run through bodily complex circuitry will also adversely affect the undeveloped circuit of the bodily complex. So there's a couple of things here that it's enticing to get into, but first let me create the foundation for this. First, they're talking about energy transfer, and there seems to be two poles here. We're talking about sexual energy transfer, or the sexual energy itself, which is physical, right? That's how it begins and it ends. It begins in physical interaction, physical sexual intercourse. So that is physical. And then there is the spiritual energy, which is, if you can put it one way, and I'll just illustrate it this way. I'm not saying that this is the way, but it's one way of getting it. Is the South Pole and the North Pole. The South Pole is prana, is that sexual energy. And then the North Pole is that spiritual energy, that I am energy. The one that describes the beingness, okay? So there's energies going both ways. And when they say, all right, so first let's just cover, that's the foundation of it. We're talking about two energies here, meeting and having transfer, of course. If there is, in between two people, we've covered this in previous videos of sexual energy transfer. Go watch it if you haven't. How there needs to be, at least for positive sexual energy transfer, there needs to be compatibility between two people, heart centers activated and willing or desiring to share the love. That's basically what sex is for. It's about union. So you gotta have love, otherwise there's no union. Love is the binding force of everything. So again, for this to happen, there needs to be, of course, love between the two. And then this will determine the type of energy that is transferred. That depends on the energy centers. Like I said, go watch the other videos. I think it's session 31. In the low 30s, we talk about sexual energy transfer a lot. And also, I cover it in session 26 at the end. The last, it's not a session 26. Let me correct myself. It's a standalone video that I made, sexual energy transfer. That is from session 26. But it was so big that I wanted to put it into its own video and not in session 26, because as you can see, it was long enough already. So, back to the question. Ross says, the instrument, so the instrument's not anomalous. Carla was not anomalous in that sense that, there's something wrong with her or something off. It's just that, compared to other people, she was much less distorted towards separation of mind, body, and spirit than many people. Of course, most of us are, like Alan Watts would say, baboons in sex, or at least that's how we grew up. I certainly did. So, she was, as we'll cover, I think this is good to mention. I'm always like feeling that I'm spoiling things, but who cares? It's just part of the answer. There is, Carla was actually very spiritual, and that made her transfer to be almost immediately spiritual in many ways, as we'll see. So that's why she was different in that sense. Like she wasn't like the rest of us, bunch of monkeys. Which does have its place. I'm not saying it's not derogatory to say that. I guess because me, I am a monkey. So no, we'll cover this. I'm trying to be funny for some reason. The energies of sexual transfer would, if run through the undeveloped spiritual, electrical, or magnetic complex, which is called circuitry, effectually blow out that particular circuit. Okay. So we're talking about the energies of sexual transfer, sexual being physical. If the person is undeveloped spiritually, spiritually, electrically or magnetically, it would blow out those circuits because it's almost like it's not developed there. So the energy won't run. I think they're just making a distinction, though it could happen. This is why I'm going to summon the word Kundalini here, referring to the popular definition that they have that, I had a Kundalini awakening, which means that they had this intense feeling or sensation. That to me is the blowout of a circuitry there. It's not like you die, or you explode, but it's certainly an intense and unmanageable feeling, sensation that you're going to get, right? And some people talk about it. They go crazy because they don't know what happened, So, there's so many stories on that. But it's not something bad or anything. It's just that as you can see, there is an intense feeling, People who have, let me give you another example, psychedelics. Some people take psychedelics and they have a bad trip. A bad trip means that they weren't developed enough to sustain the impact of information, of light that was received. I'm playing with words here, and I'm playing with also concepts about psychedelics. Psychedelics are a very long study, so I'm just getting a little bit out of it just to say that some people have this intense experience that it doesn't have to be a bad trip. It could also be a very mystical, and I've had, of course, mystical experiences, which it's impossible to describe. And also because I wasn't, quite developed at the time. I don't know how it would work now, but in any case, it's almost like you're not ready for that. So that's what's happening. Again, there are mechanisms, I suppose, consciousness that prevent this from happening in general. Now, when they say another thing, contrarily, they just mean in the opposite direction. The full spiritual energies run through bodily complex. See, like from the North Pole down to through the bodily complex circuitry. See, it's another word for sexual, which means sexual is the bodily act to elevate this energy. Spiritual is the way to lower the energy, and I don't mean it, of course, in a deprecating way, but just how it runs down. So the full spiritual energies run through bodily complex circuitry will also adversely affect the undeveloped circuit of the bodily complex, and this can work the same way. I'm going to say the same thing about Kundalini and the mystical experience as well. this actually would cover that, I would say. Spiritual energies run through the bodily complex. It can have that effect because you don't know how, it's very intense, and even in meditation, this doesn't have to be with psychedelics, like very deep meditation, and you get this emotional feeling. I've had it too, which is undescribable, ineffable. And that just means that there are things that need to come out. There are blockages, and that's what's happening. So in essence, what they're talking about here is this mechanism of energy flow that is happening in the body. It could happen through sexual means. It could happen through psychedelics, like I said. It could happen spontaneously, as some people report. It could happen, the mystical experience, to me, this is just my speculation. The mystical experience is attached to this. Now you can see that some people have mystical experiences that are life-changing, where they're, other people who have so much developed this spiritual beingness that the mystical experience is their life. It's just normal being. That's why bliss is, what comes from a fully balanced entity, right? So it's the same energy, but some people are undeveloped and they will have gradual steps or a massive step. I don't know. I can't say. This is not a science. This is not, medicine. This just happens to everybody. And I've talked to people, who've had these massive awakenings, and you can see in how they develop that this is what's happening. This energy is just increasing gradually in them, and their consciousness is just shifting. So again, there's much to cover here, but I don't know, I got carried out by this. So let's just keep going, because Ron's going to say more, and they say, some there are, such as this instrument, who have not in their particular incarnation chosen at any time to express sexual energy through the bodily circuitry. Thus, from the beginning of such an entity's experience, the body and spirit express together in any sexual action. Therefore, to transfer sexual energy for this instrument is to transfer spiritually as well as physically. This instrument's magnetic field, if scrutinized by one sensitive, will show these unusual configurations. So, going on again, I know I explained like the broader panorama of this, but I'm going now with, the question itself, which is sexual energy transfer. And in this case, Ra is saying that the particular scenario of Carla is that she didn't decide, she didn't plan, in this incarnation, to express her sexual energy through physical means, meaning it's all about consciousness, or intention rather. I, for one, can categorize myself as someone who has explored sexuality in the physical a lot. I don't remember having, there's always some spiritual, of course. Now that you know it, you know that there was always a seeking, there, which doesn't mean, anything bad. It's just how we explore sexual energy. And, in the case of Carla, she was always transferring spiritual energy, or seeking to transfer spiritual energy, because, let's put it this way, she saw from the North Pole sexual intercourse, whereas the majority of people see sexual energy transfer or sexual interaction from the bottom. Does that mean that upper is better than lower? Definitely not. It's two ways of exploring it, and it's the meeting point that makes it, the aha moment, So certainly, for us as third density beings, the requirement is always there to have physical interaction for sexual intercourse. So for a spiritual, like a person like Carla, or let me put it this way, for me, for example, it was needed to have physical, but not needed to have spiritual, to have the interaction. For Carla, she needed to have physical, but she always had spiritual. So she had the circuit already, active. Like it was going well. For us, it's a matter of developing that spirituality into sex to explore and have this transfer. I hope I kind of expressed that in a good way, because again, there's always the possibility of interpreting this as, there's something wrong with me. Oh my God, I've always found sex like an animal. Well, sure, I did, and so what? You just realize, that you're not an animal. What's the? I mean, it's a big realization. It's a big learning there. It's a huge evolution for you. Praise to you. So there's nothing wrong, and it's not like, oh, I need to get there. You are already there. It's just that you don't know it. So see, that's what I mean by unlearning things. You've always been there. So it's the revealing of things and not the learning or the catching up to. So all right. So they say transfer sexual energy for this instrument, and spiritual as well as physically. And that was her case. So if somebody, I suppose somebody from fifth density, or maybe even here, can analyze her magnetic field and will see this unusual configuration. I don't know, I lack understanding there, or knowing. So Ross says, to finalize this is not unique to one entity, but is common to a reasonable number of entities who, having lost the desire for orange and green ray, and that was supposed to be yellow, or at least is the speculation that LNL research has, and I agree, you'll see why. Having lost the desire for orange and green ray, yellow, wink wink, sexual experiences have strengthened the combined circuitry of spirit, mind, and body to express the totality of beingness in each action. It is for this reason also that the social intercourse and companionship is very beneficial to this instrument, it being sensitive to the more subtle energy transfers. See? Since Carla was very spiritual in her approach to life, I mean, she was dedicated to God, to Jesus as a Christian, and then of course, the Confederation in her later work, she was very sensitive to any other sort of energy transfers. Again, I'm going to put a very crude analogy here, but people who are, and again, I put myself here because I grew up very much in the physicality of things. My mind grew up as a scientist, not as a spiritual person. So that is why I see myself reflected more in the people who are very physical and not so spiritual. And that doesn't mean that I'm lacking spiritual. Language becomes a problem sometimes when we try to convey a message or an image. But in this case, I'm using it just to describe that a person like me may not be very sensitive to subtle energy transfers, whereas somebody very spiritual, sensitive people, what we call, you're so sensitive, you're sensible, you're weak, we say, you're easily targeted by people. That's because people are susceptible to this sort of transfers. Could be anything. Could be the room, could be the people. Whereas, we have our shells and we're like, whatever. So, there are benefits and, pros and cons to this. So this is why she was like that, and that's why they always said, it's good that she rejoices in reunions and social stuff to increase her vital energies, because energy transfer from, hanging out, you can just see this, you're also, everybody is. It's just that some of us are more, have thicker shells. But everybody is susceptible to the environment, where you are. At work, when there's a tense environment, and even sometimes when there's a very loose and, easygoing environment. When you have a boss or a team leader that is a douche, or you have somebody who is an angel, that just, you feel that. You can sense your energy being more I just feel good here, or I just feel terrible. So, going back to the beginning of this last paragraph, they say, this is not unique to one entity, but it's common to a reasonable number of entities who have lost the desire of orange and yellow. Green is love. So that's why they used to have problems, Ra. This is why it's safe to assume that they meant yellow, but again, I'm not saying it's yellow. They said green. It's just that it makes sense with what we know, and I'm sure, I don't know if Don caught this later on. I don't think they did. He did, because they would have put it into the raw context material, and they didn't. So it's safe to speculate that they meant yellow, especially because orange and yellow are physical, whereas green and beyond are spiritual, sexual experiences. So in essence, what they're saying is that people who have lost interest in what does orange and yellow mean. Orange means identity. Orange means interaction, self to self. It's me and you. And then yellow is either service to others or service to self. Do I use you for my benefit, or do I use you for expanding, who I am? When you lose interest in these two, which is again physicality, and these are the blockages that usually we have to try to give love through sexual union, then the green ray and beyond is open, and that, like they say, strengthens the combined circuitry of spirit, mind, and body to express the totality of beingness in each action. Not only, of course, in sex, but in everything else. Because once you open your heart and you realize that you're not somebody, the ego, let's put it that way. Orange and yellow means ego. The ego self, it's transcended. Then green ray is available for sexual energy transfer. And just to cover up again, remember, sexual energy transfer can occur in negative polarization, and that would be orange and yellow transfers. Or, I don't know if it's appropriate to say transfer, but at least intensification of each of the orange and yellow, right? So, in essence, what's happening is that the individual, in intention and in identity, is growing as a self, as a individual self of, possession or possessed, possessor. It's all about possession and manipulation and control. So I think I covered enough sexual energy transfer. You can see how fascinating this is. In fact, I actually have a couple of podcasts I did with a friend of mine in Spanish, and she talks about sexual energy transfer a lot. But anyhow, let's go into the next question, where Don says, thank you. If you, Ra, as an individualized entity, were incarnate on Earth now with full awareness and memory of what you know now, what would be your objective at this time on Earth as far as activities are concerned? Ra says the query suggests that which has been learned to be impractical. However, were we to again be naive enough to think that our physical presence was any more effective than that love light we send your peoples and the treasure of this contact, we would do so as we did do. We would be, and we would offer ourselves as teach learners. Okay, so now there's another question. It's gonna get funnier. But Don is asking, all right, Ra, if you were here, what would you do? Knowing everything that you know. And so Ra says, well, first of all, you're saying that we would come fully as we are. That means that we would incarnate here as we did in the past, right? So it's suggesting that what we have learned was impractical, meaning that they didn't learn anything. So they would do the same thing they did when they came here, and everybody regarded them as gods, and they were like, oh, Jesus, which hadn't incarnated yet. Oh, Jesus to come, let's get out again. So that's what they're saying, So you see, there's assumption here, and that's what they're saying. There's an assumption that first Ra is coming as a full entity knowing what they now know. And Don is going to refine this in the next question, but that's what he's saying. And so Ra says, however, were we to again be naive enough to think that our physical presence, meaning that they incarnate here, was any more effective, if we would think that coming here was more effective than what we do now of sending love light and the treasure of this contact, which for them was like, we can speak through someone, finally, after Akhenaten, 5,000 years ago, or whenever that was. I know it's close to that. So, we would do as we did do. We just become teach learners. That's just what it is. We would be teach learners. That's what Ra would do here if they would come, as, of course, that's just obvious. But you see, Don had a different question in mind, or a more specific question. And he refines it to my understanding, or at least my interpretation, because he says, knowing what you know now about our planetary condition and methods of communication, etc., if you yourself as an individual had gone through the process of incarnation here as a wanderer, see, it's a different picture now, and now have memory of a sufficient way to have the objective that you just stated, what mechanisms would you seek out for the process of teach learning in our present state of communication? And so Ra says, my brother, we perceive you have made certain unspoken connections. We acknowledge these, and for this reason cannot infringe upon your confusion. So, first of all, Don is asking if, it was really well phrased this time. And Don is asking, if you, Ra, as a wanderer, would come here, what would you do? What mechanisms? I think it was brilliant the way Don did it. Because he says, if you have memory of a sufficient way to have the objective that you just stated, which is, to be teach learners of the law of one, of course, what mechanisms would you seek out for the process of teach learning in our present state of communication? Now, you see, the thing is that Don wants to know, because all of us here are trying to communicate the law of one. When I say everybody here, at least the people who are studying the material. So if you are one of those students, then you are seeking a way, whether you know it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, you are seeking one way to express the law of one based on your individual expression of the Creator. That's what you are. You're not a self or individual self. You're not a person. The word person is, in fact, it's a non-existent thing. It's a persona. It's an act. So what you are is an individual expression of the Creator. So you are seeking to teach the law of one learn in that sense. And so Don is saying, I would like to know what you would do, because I'm interested in doing the same. And as a fantastic master, you can see the genius, not the genius, that's not the right word, but the light in Ra, the wisdom in Ra, that's the right word, the wisdom in Ra, to say, well, you just noticed that you have made some unspoken connections, meaning that whatever you want to know is because you want to do yourself, and you're going to take it from us, thinking that our method is the best, and that would be infringing upon free will, so we're not going to say anything. This question was excluded from the books, all of them, because, again, I guess there wasn't any, no good message there, but of course now that we acknowledge the raw material from a more loving and all-encompassing teaching, then of course we can read it and get some information out of here. But I think this is the biggest lesson we can get out of this, is that oftentimes we want to know what other people do. What's your method? Give me the technique. How do I do it? And we can be inspired for sure by other people, but we can never be told what to do by other people. That is empowering, very empowering, because you don't want to be told what to do. In fact, that is, and I'm going off track here, but bear with me, it's important. This is something that we carry over from childhood. We want to know from authorities what to do. We want to know. It's a different thing to be guided. It's a different thing to be inspired by, not to be told. And so a lot of that is expressed in our adulthood as, I want to know what to do, and of course the government is always there, and by the government, I don't mean, just a specific government, but any governing institution. It could be a museum, it could be, a convention, it could be the government, institution, whatever it may be, that's telling you, oh, this is real art, you should know this. That's not art. Oh, this is the law. That's not the law. This is how you should behave morally, not this way. That is authority that we have given away to other people. So it's about, reclaiming this authority for yourself. Think about it. You are God. Why would you give your authority away to other people that have a different perspective of God? Which is that they think they are God in the Yahweh meaning. Does that make sense? So, we're best served sometimes by seeing where we're giving our authority away. And this is not a revolutionary thinking. This is, simple, common sense. Once you have acquired some gnosis about yourself, then you don't want to know what other people do, and this could be very rooted in the subconscious, but again, I don't want to get off track too much, but you get the meaning. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what Ra is, the wisdom of Ra speaking here, is saying, nope, we're not going to tell you because you think that our method is best, and you should trust yourself. You're doing what you're supposed to do. That's it. And we always get reminded of this by every single master, interdimensional, human, doesn't matter. They are all wise enough to tell us this. What would the negatives tell us? Of course, oh, you don't know what you're doing. Let me tell you what to do. So see, it's easy to discern from the two. Question 5. Let's get to it. Don says, I was afraid of that. My lecture yesterday was attended by only a few. If this had occurred during a UFO flap, as we call them, many more would have attended. But since Orion entities cause the flaps primarily, what is Orion's reward, shall I say, for visibility, in that they actually create greater chances and opportunities for dissemination of information, such as mine, at this time? So, it's a good question. And Ra says, this assumption is incorrect. The flaps cause many fears among your peoples, many speakings, understandings, concernings, plots, cover-ups, mutilations, killings, and other negative impressions. Even those supposedly positive reports, which gain public awareness, speak of doom. You may understand yourself as one who will be in the minority due to the understandings which you wish to share, if we may use that misnomer. The misnomer here, I don't know if they've used this word before, but they always say, most of the time, I think, not always, but every time they use the word understanding, they make emphasis in saying, if you excuse the term, if we may use that misnomer, if we can, use the term loosely, I don't know, something like that, because full understanding is not of this density, which is a blessing, Hey, guess what? You don't have to understand anything. You just have to experience and live and have fun. This density is about fun. It's not about, going to church, and praying. You have to be chastity, keep chastity and all that. Have fun, as long as you're not hurting anybody, and yourself, of course. So, again, let's go back to the question. Don says, I did a lecture, which actually is accessible. You can read it. I don't have the link and I'll probably forget to put it in the description, but if you go to session 48 in the lawof1.info, which I do have the link in the description, go to session 48 and you'll see that LL Research has a transcript of that lecture that Don gave about UFOs. I didn't read it, so sorry. Go read it if you want to. But in any case, he's saying, listen, I went to UFO lecture. I did a lecture on UFOs and nobody attended. But if this lecture was around the time where there were UFO flaps is just sightings that just happening, and people would be all, oh my god, there are extraterrestrials and stuff, and so it would have gained publicity to go to the UFO convention. So, Don says, like, if this is done by Orion Group, and again, there are 3 sources of UFOs. First, Confederation, very rare. Second, Orion, quite common. Third, Humans, which is the space program, the secret space program, which was uncovered by Ra by coincidence. In session 8, they talked about it like, oh yeah, you mean the people that have been developing your UFOs in your military bases. Don was like, what? What are you talking about? How can this happen? Of course, naivety at that time, people didn't know. Now we know. But in any case, so those are the sightings. So Don is asking, all this publicity, it's going to bring people to my lectures. What does Orion have to gain here? And Ross says the assumption is incorrect, because if you notice, that's what, UFO flaps instill in people. There is fear, there is talking about, this, and you can see it now even, all these UFO sightings and stuff. It's not because, Ascension is here, so now all the ETs are coming to save us. That is Orion. That is secret space program. Don't believe in that. See, I'm saying don't believe in that. Believe what you will. But let's just put it this way. The positive, and we're going to see it here too, but the positive path has nothing to do with salvation from other ETs. None whatsoever. Aside from, the loving light, love light, you can see how unpopular this is, for people who have been going on for ages, talking about UFOs and it's probably why, channels like this are very unpopular and will continue to be, I'm sure, because people don't care. They want the exciting part. They want all the, all the action that's going to happen, We want to see UFOs fighting each other and stuff like that. I know, I'm being comical here, but you get the point. So this is what Ron is saying, that this instills fear. They talk about cover-ups and mutilations and killings. All cattle mutilation is done by UFOs. All the abductions and all this stuff. This is stirring the pot. Let's put it this way: stirring the pot with UFO sightings causes this. So it's not that they're going to cause, and they're going to say this here. You may understand yourself. They say something else. They say something else, but I think this is the part. You may understand yourself as one who will be in the minority due to the understandings which you wish to share. You wish to share understandings about the law of one. You will be in the minority. People are not interested in this stuff. People are interested in sensationalism, not in this. I get so often people talking about, did you see this? The Elohim, the giants, and the gold that was extracted here for Nibiru or whatever it is. All this stuff. How practical is this? When I tell them like, oh, that's awesome. Yes, but how does this help you in your evolution? What do you mean evolution? See, that to me I know, I sound maybe like an old man here, but that's my interest. I'm interested in talking about spiritual evolution, not about, ETs and all the types of ETs that are categorized. I'm not going to mention any names, but there's so much in the UFO communities now talking about the different types of ETs that should be exposed and disclosure and so on. I think forgive the word, but it's garbage. You know, all of that is garbage in my views of how we can invest our incarnation here to evolve spiritually. Not because we want to achieve any state of spirituality, but because we want to enjoy from a different perspective this life. And there's no greater joy than the realizing of the self. None whatsoever. I don't care who says it. You're talking about samsara here. Talking about the wheel of becoming, you know. And that's all well and good. You know, that's another way to play the game. But I am concerned with realization of the self. Coincidentally, I have it written down. I didn't do it for that purpose. I am. That's what I am. So, not what I, Gabriel, am, but the I am. You know, the I of consciousness. Okay, so next part of this answer, Ra says, we perceive there is a further point we may posit at this time. The audience, brought about by Orion-type publicity, is not seated by seniority of vibration to a great extent. The audiences receiving teach learnings without stimulus from publicity will be more greatly oriented towards illumination. Therefore, forget you the counting. That's a joke. I mean, that's a joke in the students, not a joke. That sounds a little weird. I got ahead of myself. First, forget you the counting is a joke that exists in, you know, when we make fun of how Ra speaks. Let's say the scholarship around the raw material. Forget you the counting. A couple of sessions ago, they spoke like Yoda. I forgot what they said, but now it's forget you the counting. I just think it's funny. But they're basically saying it's like, forget about counting. You know, the people. It's just funny. Forget you the counting. Funny English. Who am I to speak? My English is it's quite limited. So they're saying in essence, you know, oh, we can speak about one final thing or a further point, that the publicity, you know, the people who are seeking this orientation, I mean, you can see it now with videos. A lot of people are seeking videos of, you know, the sensationalism. Oh, things need to be exposed, you know, things need to, I mean, I have been, and I'm saying it because I used to be an audience for this. I had to transcend this type of video seeking of the things that must be uncovered and revealed. Why are we so concerned with revealing things in the external world when we haven't even touched the internal world? And even those of us who have started to touch the internal world have so much to go through. It's easier and faster to study the cosmos in yourself, the microcosm, than to study the external. Let's put it this way. Is it easier to study in a laboratory where you have everything, assuming you have everything, or to go out in the world to, you know, accumulate things and, you know, you get the point. Trying to devise the laboratory outside, you know, from rudimentary ways and things. You can do it, of course, but if you have the means already and the tools, why not do it? So in any case, I feel like I'm putting too much of my own publicity here, which is just, hey, just know yourself. So in any case, they're saying that, see, the audiences receiving teach learnings without stimulus from publicity will be more greatly oriented towards illumination. That's what they're talking about, illumination. What does illumination means? The Illuminati? Sure, that too. They are Illuminati. That's why they feel great, because they took illumination as a means for control and manipulation. That's what Illuminati means in the sense of our social culture. They took this. There's a lot of talk about Masons, you know. I just discovered that I had ancestry from Masons. And it's all the same thing, you know, Gnosticism, the Egyptian, the Kybalion, which I just did a whole series on. I mean, there's so much that speaks about the law of one, in essence. So people are greatly oriented towards illumination and not sensationalism. Period. I think it's a good way to end this part. And now we're gonna get into the last question, which is a long one too. It's gonna be a long video as usual, but who cares? Let's just speak and be done with this. Don says, question 6. Thank you, that cleared it up very well. A very important point. Can you tell me how positive and negative polarizations in fourth and fifth density are used to cause work in consciousness? And here we go. I said this was going to be the meat and bones. So let's make it. Let's make it happen. There is very little work, Ra says, in consciousness in fourth and fifth densities compared to the work done in third density. The work that is accomplished in positive fourth is that work whereby the positive social memory complex, having through slow stages harmoniously integrated itself, goes forth to aid those of less positive orientation, which seek their aid. Thus, their service is their work. Okay. How do we do work? First of all, Don says work in consciousness, which I know I can relate to what he meant. And Ra being more specific, of course, they say the work done in fourth density is not much about consciousness. Consciousness meaning polarization in consciousness. You have polarized already in consciousness if you're in fourth density. So you're either positive or negative. Here, you're sliding in between the two. You haven't decided. And of course, if you decided, then, it's settled. You are positive or you're negative. But that's the play here. Like, the main play here is, are you a positive or a negative being? Well, I don't know what positive or negative means. All right, so here it is, the law of one. Or Gnosticism, or Buddhism, for that matter. It doesn't matter. That's how you polarize. That's work in third density, as they say. It's very little work in consciousness in fourth density, and they're going to cover how there is little work and what that work is. The work that is accomplished in positive fourth is that work whereby the positive social memory complex. Now they're going already. Let me a little spoiler, which we're going to cover in a little bit. Fourth density. You first become fourth density like we are right now. We decide to be positive, and we're going to create a social memory complex. That's the work that is being done right now. The preliminary work, let's put it that way. So the preliminary work that is being done for social memory complex is what we're doing now. We're getting cohesion, and once we transcend into fourth density, then that social memory complex starts forming quickly. Okay, in that process is where there's that little work in consciousness that they say. There's more polarization because you need to reach a certain polarization to become a social memory complex. So that's what they're referring, which they're going to cover in a little bit. I just wanted to put that ahead of time because they're going to say now the work that is accomplished in fourth density, which is the real work, in fourth density, is whereby the positive social memory complex, having through slow stages harmoniously integrated itself. See, slow stages harmoniously integrated itself. That's the process I just described. Goes forth to aid those of less positive orientation, which seek their aid. So basically, as a social memory complex, we on Gaia, on Mother Gaia, planet Earth, we're going to seek to help others in other planets, or maybe here, if there is another civilization or humanity that will recycle again. Third density will flourish again in this planet after fourth density has accommodated itself, or the social memory complex is established and they're far from reach in physical interaction with third density. So that is what's going to happen. They, or we, are going to help these people. We're going to send them love light, and that is the service. Their service is their work. So that's what's happening there. Okay, there is a lot to be said here, but you have been studying this with me, I assume. If not, there's a lot to cover in previous session about social memory complex. Go watch those, really interesting. And so that's the work that is done in fourth density. So they're basically starting up with saying it's not consciousness in the way you see it. is service that is done in fourth density. It's service because you're already polarized in consciousness. All right. So they keep going. And through this dynamic between the societal self and the other self, which is the object of love, greater and greater intensities of understanding or compassion are attained. This intensity continues until the appropriate intensity of the light may be welcome. This is fourth density harvest. All right, so what they're saying here is that, just want to make sure that I covered, yes, all right, I'm going well. They're saying that between the dynamic of the social memory complex and the other self, which maybe, I don't know, let's just say humans here on Earth, again, 10,000 years from now, there starts another cycle, third density cycle. So the fourth density beings that are going to inhabit that sphere of fourth density on planet Earth is going to aid at least planet Earth and possibly other planets with their love light sending. You know, that's what they do. Let me give you an example. In the channelings, Hatton, Hatton, is one of the Confederation entities. They are fourth density, and they are helping planet Earth in the same way. Through the channeling, of course, but mostly as a, let's call it metaphysical, beaming of light, wisdom and love. Kuo is another one, which is, again, you know, not to get into the specifics, but it's a combination of Hatton, Latui, and Ra, believe it or not. So Ra is still here. You know, they're communicating with us. We are channeling all of them. That's another thing. Channeling is not getting into a trance alone. Channeling is basically, you're a radar here. Actually, you're a transmitter and a receiver. So you're a receiver of, you know, information impressed on you. So you are channeling information as well. In fact, you're not a being, you're a channel. You're an instrument. And depending on where you're tuned into, your frequency, that's what it means. You know, your frequency. Which frequency are you attuned to? But then again, you know, that's, oh my god, I keep talking about this. But let me restrain myself to the session. In any case, this intensity continues until the appropriate intensity of the light love. The intensity is the gaining of compassion and understanding by helping others. We become more aware, we expand ourselves, right? This is why I said that it is important at the beginning of the video. I said that it's important to know that there is a practical aspect to this in our lives. It's not about fourth density work. We can do this thing here too. If limited by our perception, it's still powerful, very powerful, because of the action of catalyst. So the same way a fourth density social memory complex aids other entities by beaming their love and light, we can do the same here for other people, and we actually do. So our way of service is, in fact, our way of expanding this, you know, of gaining more compassion and understanding. It's not like, oh, we don't have understanding and compassion in third density. We're gonna wait. We have to wait for fourth density. No, you have a heart. The heart is connected to fourth density. Your throat chakra is connected to fifth density. So you are capable of doing this work in the human form, and it's actually even more powerful because of the veil of forgetting. So, with this in mind, the intensity, I love that word, intensity continues until the appropriate intensity of the light may be welcome. Remember when we talk about the Kundalini receiving the light from the north and, you know, being able to receive the impact of light? Well, the same way. That's what fourth density is doing. Social memory complex, it's expanding the capability of receiving light so they can themselves be graduated into fifth density. This is fourth density harvest. That's what they say. In the same way, we can use our fourth energy center, our heart center, so much as to welcome the light from the throat chakra, and we develop it too. We grow in consciousness, we grow spiritually, which means just expanding yourself. Not that I need to grow because I'm not there yet. It's expanding who you already are. All right. Before I get carried out by my philosophical points of view here, Ra continues and says, within 4 density positive, there are minor amounts of catalysts of a spiritual and mental complex distortion. This is what I covered before, or I spoiled before. This occurs during the process of harmonizing to the extent of forming the social memory complex. This causes some small catalyst and work to occur, but the great work of 4 density lies in the contact betwixt the social self and less polarized self. So, I already laid the groundwork for this, which is what they're saying. There is some catalyst. They say minor amounts of catalyst. So, you can check it out. I mean, if you're 4 density already, a 4 density being, and you still have some sort of, attachments, let's just say attachments, that for 3rd density, you're going to lose that. You need minor amounts of catalyst, of spiritual and mental complex distortions. Not bodily, because you're already, a spirit. And so you need those mental and spiritual catalysts to show you that, hey, relax, we're all here to be with each other. Let's just melt in the love together. And that's what's happening. So that is the minor work. That is the little work in consciousness that needs to be done at the beginning stages of 4 density manifestation. I want to use that word because that's what's happening right now. We're going into the transition into 4 density, and that's why you see now in the New Age spiritual groups a lot of talk about love and compassion and so on, because everybody's feeling these energies. But we're going beyond that here, of course, in the law of one, because we know that it doesn't stop with love. It goes beyond. We need wisdom for that, and it's unity, and we are one. Okay, let's go to the next part, where they say, in 4 density negative, much work is accomplished during the fighting for position which precedes the period of the social memory complex. There are opportunities to polarize negatively by control of other selves. During the social memory complex period of 4 density negative, the situation is the same. The work takes place through the societal reaching out to less polarized other self in order to aid in negative polarization. So now we're covering the negatives, los negativos. What do? Okay, there's a difference. Of course, as we know, they're separate. They're not cohesive in their approach to doing work, doing service. That's the word here, service. So first of all, there is a point in the social memory complex formation of 4 density negative where there is the establishing of the pecking order, the establishing of hierarchies. In essence, I don't know, I picture them in my human analogy as a bunch of brutes, fighting over each other, or fighting each other over the position that they deserve. In fact, we can see a sort of reflection of that, losing some dimensions, in the way, let's say, monarchies are established. A monarchy is, and a government for any, for that matter, you can see this, when, especially here in the United States, we can see so many, I don't want to call things out, but you can see things that have been established as, they were mafia before, and now they are syndicates, or, they're institutions. So it's always, who's the better crook? Who's the last survivor for who is going to say, I am king, I am governor, I am whatever. This is the law. I say it because I have order. So the same thing happens here. We establish a pecking order, much like a corporation. And again, the Vatican or anything else, you can see an order, which one needs to. There is a respect for others and so on. You don't see this, in Asia, or at least not in Asia, but in Hinduism or other cultures. I mean, where there's no need for this pecking order. So that's what's happening. And then During the social memory complex period, there's a lot of fighting and stuff, and then they form the social memory complex, which is like a corporation. I like to call it a corporation, where they're all trying to, mess with each other. But the situation is the same as in positive. They work through the social, reaching out to less polarized other selves. So people here say they're going to be contacted, like we are, by Orion Group. Orion Group is mainly for density. We are contacted by them, so they can aid in the negative polarization of people, and that's what they have been doing. That's why we have this beautiful society. And I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. I mean it in a more very educational, that we have all this negativity. It's more for us. I mean, it's more fuel for our positive thinking. All right, so let's go on. Ross says, in fifth density, positive and negative, the concept of work done through a potential difference is not particularly helpful, as fifth density entities are, again, intensifying rather than potentiating. Okay, so in fifth density, positive and negative, the concept of work done through potential difference is not particularly helpful. Okay, here we get to a point that we have to stop thinking human, once again. For a moment, at least. The entity in fourth density is trying to potentiate that polarization, meaning that they're trying to expand, like I said. Their view, their compassion, their understanding, or in this case, the negatives, they want to expand their, what's the word? Their empire. That's what it is. It's an empire, right? So they're trying to expand their empire, which is an illusion. They never own anybody. They feel that they own people. And that's how they expand their own sense of self. So, once they do this, they go into fifth density. And in fifth density, there's no more potentiation, but rather intensifying the learning, the wisdom that has been acquired needs to be intensified. That is fifth density. It also happens in positive, because that's just the density of wisdom. In positive social memory complexes, and also individuals. Remember that in fifth density, there's no need for social memory complexes in the positive side, but you can use it, so it's optional. You can grow individually because all you're doing is intensifying. You don't need other people per se, or other entities. You are intensifying this potentiated love with light. So, there's more to say about fifth density. Ron says, in positive, the fifth density complex uses sixth density teach learners to study the more illuminated understandings of unity, thus becoming more and more wise. Fifth density positive social memory complexes often will choose to divide their service to others in two ways. First, the beaming of light to creation. Second, the sending of groups to be of aid as instruments of light, such as those whom you are familiar with through channels. Oh, it's a good one here. Let me make a pause here, because I think we have one more. Let's see. Yeah, we have one more slide, and that's all we're going to cover for this part. But in the previous one, okay, so they say in positive, the fifth density complex uses sixth density teach learners. So, okay, so, in positive fifth density, they're using their teachers from sixth density to become more wise, for the teachings of unity. It only makes sense. Sixth density is the density of unity. Law of one. Atman. So, non-dualism. No polarity. Okay, so fifth density positive social memory complexes often will choose to divide their service into two. Okay, so the first one is the beaming of light to creation. That to me sounds like the beaming of light to creation. It's almost like creation itself. It's indulging in the beauty of creation. We're playing with light. Let's put it that way. We're playing with light in a more organized fashion. And the second one is the sending of groups to be of aid as instruments of light, such as those whom you are familiar with through channels. Some people interpret this, I know Scott Mandelker did, I remember, as instruments of light meaning, people, wanderers here, which it's a great possibility. Yes, sure, it happens. However, I think what they mean is that sending of groups to be of aid as instruments. It sounds to me groups is like La Tui, for example. They're fifth density, and we are aware of them through channels. So there are others that are not channeled, and they could be channeled, like maybe people from Sirius or the Pleiades. People talk about that a lot, and there's a lot of that. There are other social memory complexes and fifth density entities, positive, that are being channeled here. So it's not that they come here as wanderers only, but they serve as, they are teach learners, right? And that's what they do. They offer their service. They serve as instruments of light, not necessarily incarnated. So I'm just adding to the current interpretation of this, because that's how I see it. So the last part, Ra says, in fifth density negative, service to self has become extremely intense, and the self has shrunk or compacted so that the dialogues with the teach learners are used exclusively in order to intensify wisdom. There are very, very few fifth density negative wanderers, for they fear the forgetting. There are very, very few fifth density Orion members, for they do not any longer perceive any virtue in other selves. Alright, so in fifth density negative, service self has become extremely intense. Of course, this is the moment where they are, they're more individualized. They don't need the corporation anymore. So they have become extremely egotistic, I guess. And they have shrunk or compacted. That's a nice set of words. So the dialogues with teach learners, I'm actually surprised that they have teach learners. From where? I don't know. Why would they teach him? I don't know. It's a good question. Are used exclusively in order to intensify wisdom. What kind of wisdom? I'm not sure. Wisdom as to how to manipulate others, and that's what they do. That's what their work. As the LEGGE research group was attacked during this channeling by a fifth density negative. That's what they do. There's not a controversy. There's a discrepancy here between I think it's session 7, question 6, that they said that there is an equal amount of entities from the Orion group in 4th and 5th density. And now they're saying here in session 48, question 6 again, I think it was 15, question 15. Question 6 was here. Where they said now that there are very few 5th density negative wanderers, for they fear the forgetting. That one makes sense, of course. But the discrepancy is when they say there are very, very few 5th density Orion members, for they do not any longer perceive any virtue in other selves. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they were kind of off when they used that word. I forgot what word they used, but it was like similar or equal amount in 4th and 5th density Orion group, or if they were mistaken here to say that there were few. But remember from last session, I think it was, when we talked about 4th density, how we lose or we gain, we gain people or entities from 4th density negative in the graduation or in the process of graduation to 5th, because they realize, oh, I'm not, selfish. I'm a loving being. And I think it's 25% or 20%, something like that. So it can't be similar. It has to be off. So in any case, I don't know. I'm not here to analyze that point. That's kind of irrelevant. Whatever we have is what we have. But that's, I just wanted to mention that because it's also emphasized in the material. There is discrepancy there. So at your own discretion, it's up to you how to interpret it. But I think it's trivial, very trivial. So that's the end. Conclusions. We covered sexual energy transfer, which I think was very important to understand the perspective of energy from spiritual and from physical. and how they meet. Remember, the mind is the one that is binding the two together. The mind is the one that's creating everything. So your mind needs to be directed somewhere. But without getting into that, I think the most important part, because I covered that pretty well, I think, is to get the practical sense of this last question, which is, you know that you have the possibility of increasing your, whatever your definition is of the heart center. That's where you need to expand. Not that you need to, but you can expand. You have the potentiation. And then you can intensify what you learn, what you perceive, what you unlearn too, rather. I like that word. To simply be a co-creator. That's blue. So everything that we discuss here and the process of fourth and fifth density work that is done can be applied in the human form, because we are a microcosm. We are not a limited being. We are just an expression, a beautiful expression of, let's call it the tiny expression, the holographic expression of the creation. And so we can intensify all of that, not because we want to achieve a purpose, or we have a purpose to achieve an objective. It's just because we can, and it's fun. It's fun to realize how fun this life is. The universe is not serious. The universe is playful. It's not playful in the mocking way. It's playful in the way that it just likes to play with itself. Sounds weird, but that's what we're doing. It's an orgasmic universe. It's an orgasmic feeling to be alive. It's the most important thing. Purpose to be alive, purpose of life is to be alive. Simple as that. Anything else is a complication. It's the turning of the wheel of samsara, which we all enjoy doing. And it's not a bad thing to go into samsara. It's just to go blind into samsara, or to go willingly and say, I know what I'm doing. I'm playing. It's not serious. It's not a body. It's not a mind. This is the universe expressing itself. So, very long session. Very long video. But I guess you guys are used to it already. If you don't, please let me know, because I love feedback. Would you rather have shorter sessions or videos? Is this enough? You watch it in parts? I like to know how you watch these videos, because you're in session 48. So I'm assuming you've watched previous, you may have skipped a couple of them that didn't seem interesting, which is fair. But so far you've gotten used to this method. I would like to know. Alright, so leave me a comment there. Subscribe if you haven't. Give a like to the video. And if you want to support the channel, which is optional, completely optional, but is very much appreciated by this one expression of yourself here, all the links are in the description. So, we leave part 2 for next week as usual. We're going to cover some other stuff. I think there's more about birth, life, death, and all that. Interesting things which we covered in the last session. I think it was fantastic. So with that, I leave you. Thank you so much. I'll see you in part 2 of session 48.